All right. Welcome to Burlingame City Council meeting of March 6th, 2023. And a little like Rip Van Winkle, it feels like we're waking up after a 3-year slumber. As I was reflecting as we were coming here, I think there are some common memories, common events that we share that are generational. So our parents remember where they were when JFK was shot. I remember where I was when we landed a man on the moon. I think we all remember where we were on 9/11. And I think we're all going to remember where we were when we heard about this odd disease exactly 3 years ago that might be a bit of a problem. And here we are. So it's not back to normal. It won't ever be back to normal, but it is in some ways an improvement, which is that we have a hybrid system. We have people joining us from home, from the road, from work, and also here in the chambers. So welcome to colleagues. It's good to see you. It's good to be doing the work of the people here in front of the people. And I look forward to a very productive time ahead. So with that, I've called the meeting to order. We will do the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'd like to ask the hardest working county supervisor we know to lead us in the pledge, Supervisor Dave Pine.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So nice to find a real flag. That takes us to roll call, Madam City Clerk.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Present.
Councilmember Beach. Here. Councilmember Ortiz.
Here.
Vice Mayor Coulson. Here. Mayor Brownrigg.
Here, all accounted for. We did have a closed session this evening. Mr. City Attorney, would you like to report out?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was no reportable action from tonight's closed session.
Thank you very much. Takes us to upcoming events. It is Women's History Month, and I will start with the event farthest in the future, but I am pleased to say that at our next City Council meeting on March 20th, we'll have Congresswoman Jackie Spear here to talk about the issues of women and girls here in the county and some of the work that she's doing. So looking forward to that. On March 8th, this is not in actual chronological order, but in March 8th, our library is organizing a talk of a lifetime of leadership in service. And this is being led by retired Colonel Alden Cunningham at the Lane Room. And he is going to discuss his recently published book, A Cold War Warrior's Report, A Lifetime of Leadership in Service. It will capture every element of his own experience with leadership in his military academy years, in his service in the field artillery, and in many other elements of his capacity as serving our nation overseas and protecting these shores. So we thank Colonel Cunningham for his service, and we urge you to be at the Lane Room on March 8th at 6 p.m. To talk to him about his book. I guess I'm being asked to shill for our Park and Rec department, but if you care to advertise in our quarterly Park and Rec digest, there is room. And so please go ahead and have your message brought out to our community. The Royal Ball, which is March 10th, Friday, March 10th from 6 to 8 p.m. It still has spots available. And finally, our senior trip is to the Disney Museum on March 23rd. That will leave at 9 a.m. and sign up through Park and Rec for that. Tomorrow is a fun day in Burlingame. It is Arbor Day, and this year we're celebrating it at Murray Field at 10 o'clock, I think, right? 10 o'clock at Murray Field. So please join us for that. And then finally, next Wednesday, March 15th, we'll be doing our budget session. So we would welcome your participation in the budget session. Those are the events I have. Do colleagues have any other events they want to alert? Seeing none, then we'll move forward. And that takes me to the great pleasure of inviting our county supervisor and Burlingame neighbor and friend, David Pine, to the podium and tell us a little bit about what you've been working on.
Good evening, council members. It's a pleasure to be here, particularly at your first in-person meeting in 3 years. It is indeed a significant evening. Before I get too far, though, let me introduce my Chief of Staff, Linda Wolin, who you've all worked with. Linda is an extraordinary asset to my office and to the county, and she's the liaison with the city of Burlingame. So you guys are in good stead to have Linda working with you. So I thought tonight I would just give a brief snapshot of some of the things we're working on at the county. And I thought perhaps the best way to do that would be to highlight some of the board's priorities and some of my personal priorities for the year ahead. I am serving as president this year. So the board's policies or priorities fall into 3 categories: housing, children's and families, and emergency services. So starting with housing, we have a tremendous focus on reaching functional zero homelessness. And what does that mean, functional zero? That means that every unsheltered person who wants a temporary bed to stay in will have a bed at their disposal. So to reach the goal, the county has been investing ARPA money and home key money in acquiring hotels. To date, we've acquired 5 hotels totaling about 600 units. So this was a real silver lining of the COVID crisis to have these funds become available, and we could put them to this purpose. But the real shining star of our efforts in this area will be this new navigation center, which we're opening in Redwood City. The groundbreaking is slated for March 31st, and this is going to be just a phenomenal asset for the county. We'll have 240 individual units, most of which will have private showers and bathrooms. It will be I believe, the largest navigational center in Northern California. So if you can come on the 31st, or if you want to tour sometime, let me know. I'd really like to, expose you to it. And the idea behind this navigation center is not only will there be, a residence where people can have dignity, but there'll also be wraparound service for people who reside there. So as part of our efforts to reduce homelessness, another important objective is investing in homeless outreach teams. And homeless outreach teams are typically staffed by Life Moves. And what they do is they bring together or work in areas where we have the most intense populations of homelessness. And they work with city officials, police departments, county mental health providers to really work with individuals on a one-by-one basis and try to convince them of the importance of utilizing services. We had some real good success with this in Millbrae, which I wanted to highlight since it joins Burlingame, of course. So in Millbrae, there was a real issue with people getting off the last BART train in the evening, and then staying in that area in downtown Millbrae. So we did utilize one of these HUT teams. In fact, what we did is we had 2 dedicated homeless outreach staff who focused on these particular individuals, and it's really had a great success. So, something that perhaps we can expand into Burlingame. So in addition to working on homelessness, we also, of course, have to create more housing. And to do so, the biggest tool in our tool chest continues to be Measure K. Measure K is just a remarkable thing with the 1.5 cent sales tax. And we're investing about $20 million a year into affordable housing in the county and continuing to support Home for All and production of ADUs. And finally, on the homelessness, when it comes to housing, our focus in recent weeks has really turned to homelessness for poor housing conditions for farm workers. The events in Half Moon Bay really shed a light on just how difficult that situation is. So the county, as part of its priority on housing, will be investing more in farm worker housing and seeking federal grants and state grants to make Well, a second objective of the county this year is children and family. As someone who's been involved in public service for some time now, I don't think there's any better investment than one can make than in the young children. And so we will continue to focus on some of our signature initiatives, one being the big lift to increase third grade reading proficiency, another called Build Up to increase the supply of childcare centers in the county. And then of course, on top of our kind of day-to-day work of helping lower income families with social safety net services such as CalFresh, healthcare for the uninsured, WIC programs, job training. Really excited about this new economic advancement center that we've set up in South San Francisco, and we'll have another one soon on the coast side. So that's a key priority for the board. And then a third priority that we recently determined was continuing to invest in emergency services. You know, we've really now gone through really 3 incredibly trying periods. We've had the COVID, which that is something that will be in our memories for a long, long time. We've had the storms this winter, and then we had the tragic shootings in Half Moon Bay. And in all these cases, we've really come to learn the importance of really having effective emergency services at our disposal. So we plan to do more investment in the San Mateo Event Center and possibly also the Cow Palace. So those are some of the goals that the county has focused on as a board. Personally, my work will continue in the areas of climate change, where I have the privilege of serving with Councilwoman Colson on shoreline. I'm really excited about the work we're doing in Burlingame on the zoning ordinance and on the new project involving Millbrae and San Francisco Airport and Burlingame. I'll continue, of course, to serve on Peninsula Clean Energy. I'm very involved with work in the Bay. I chaired the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, and I'll serve on PCDC. So these are the issues that I will continue to focus on as we go forward. Just mention a couple others, and I can wrap up. Gun violence prevention is something that I've invested quite a bit of time on over the last few years. I'm really proud of the ordinances that the county has passed. We have a strong gun safety storage ordinance, which City of Burlingame also adopted. We've adopted a gun buyback programs, which have been quite successful. And most recently, we've started a new program, a gun relinquishment program, where we're invested county funds to take all efforts possible to make sure that people who are legally in guns have those guns removed. So another priority of mine as we go forward. But in concluding, I would just say that it's always a pleasure working with the 5 of you and working with staff. Always looking for opportunities to partner together, and really wishing everyone a productive year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Pine. I'm sure there are questions or comments if you have a few extra minutes.
Sure thing.
Colleagues? Yes, please, Vice Mayor.
Down. Okay. Thank you, Supervisor Pine. I really appreciate it. Can you just tell us a little bit? We're hearing all about the state having a deficit budget situation. Can you just tell us a little bit about the financial health overall and the budget this year for the county?
Well, the county continues to have a strong financial condition. We have really very, very strong reserves. We've over the years have been quite aggressive in paying off our pension unfunded liabilities. Fortunately, the property tax is still strong. So while we are definitely watching the state budget closely and the potential $45 million
yes, Councilmember Beach.
Thanks for the update, Supervisor Pine. Great priorities, and thank you for the work that you and your team are doing. Can you tell us a little bit more about any developments in the childcare arena with Build Up San Mateo County or anything else? We know it's such a need here throughout the county, but any updates that you're thinking might be on the horizon?
Well, one thing that you should be aware of, at the end of this week, the Child Care Partnership Council will be releasing a needs assessment of the child care shortage in the county. So keep an eye on that. And again, this is an area where we've been able to use some of the federal funding to make some investments as well. try out for that needs assessment coming up.
Thank you. We remember when you brought first five presentation a number of years ago here, but
All right,
it's great to have that revamped needs assessment because it's changed so much post pandemic.
Right.
So that's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Beach. I'm sorry, can you, Ms. Wolin, speak just because of people listening at home?
The child's care needs assessment just referenced will be released at an event on Friday morning from 8:30 to 11 at Skyline College, and you're all invited, and I can share the invitation with staff if anybody's interested.
Terrific.
Will that be recorded, Supervisor Pine? Do you know?
I suspect so.
Okay, great.
If there aren't any other questions, I have a sort of a comment or question, which is apropos of the first topic, Mr. Supervisor, homelessness. So it's terrific to see the county really leading on this and to have a goal of functional zero. I think we're all proud of living in a county that would do that. So tip of the hat. It is a subject that has, for me anyway, elicited more resident comment over the last 6 months than I've had in 10 years. And it's always with a sense of, a big heart for the people who are struggling, but also a little bit of fear sometimes. So one resident had somebody who's homeless and probably mentally ill throw a steel bar at her. Another resident doesn't feel comfortable having her kids at the bus stop near Lenardi's because it's very often populated. And so I think I would be interested in finding out how we can participate in your hot program with Millbrae and Life Moves. And also I should add, one of our merchants over on the Rollins Road side has commented that he feels conditions have become far less amenable, for example, crossing Millbrae Bridge. So it really is a border, it really does affect our city and we want to help. So maybe separately, we could follow up with staff to find out how we could perhaps expand that program and bring more resources into helping folks and helping our residents
Yeah,
too.
no, I'll be happy to work on that. I think the homeless outreach teams is really the best tool available to address this. Is many of these individuals just need such an intensive one-on-one intervention because of their mental health and substance abuse issues in particular.
Right, exactly. And to underscore, it's never with anger, at least the residents I've talked to, but there is a sense of fear and if we can help both parties, it seems like a good thing to do.
Yeah, agree, 100%.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you again.
All
for
right.
your service. It's really
Good to see you.
gracious of you to be here tonight. It's not like you don't have other calls on your time.
I know. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us into public comment. This is the time when anybody in the public can speak to us on issues that are not on our agenda. If they're on the agenda, then please wait for that item. And we will listen politely. We can't respond because it's not agendized, but we'd love to hear from you. So are there any comments, Madam City Clerk?
Don't think there's any from our audience that are here in person, but we do have 4 attendees online and I don't see any of them raising their hand. And I also don't have an email. I think we're good to go.
Okay, well then we'll move through public comment. And that takes us to the consent calendar. We have a number of items, like items 8A through M. Are there any items that my colleagues would like to pull for further discussion? I see no nods and therefore I'd ask, is there anybody in the public who's,
I have one.
Oh.
Sorry. I'm looking for the item number, but I'm not so much pulling it because I don't agree with wanting it to be approved. It's more a question about whether or not we can expand it, and that's the concessionary services at the library and consider other locations such as new community center.
is this the
Yeah.
8I, no, that's Fika.
That's Speaker Cafe, that's the.
Yeah,
Is that what you mean? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought you meant there's also the Duncan Trust
no.
issue.
So I'm fully supportive
No,
of the,
Mr.
go ahead.
Councilmember, no, if we're going to discuss it, we'll pull it. So
Okay.
Pull out item 8I. That's fine. And not seeing any others then, and I'm sorry, any members of the public want to pull any items, Madam City Clerk?
I don't see any emails and don't, I don't have any attendees with their hand up.
In which case I'd welcome a motion to approve the other consent items.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
So that would be items 8A through M with the exception of 8I. That's a motion on the floor. Is there
My second.
second from council member? So motion made by council member Ortiz, seconded by council member Stevenson. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Aye.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Coulson,
Yes.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes. So this goes faster than Zoom, doesn't it? And that takes us to item 8I. I suppose it's our city librarian, but it may be that, well, perhaps you could join us, Mr. McCullough. Works Director.
It might be for the Parks Director because I'm fully supportive of concessions at some of our venues to encourage public participation and attendance at events and things that are important from the library standpoint. But I also look at it in the same lens for the new community center. And so just curious about the contract, supportive of that, but also considering whether or not we want to expand the consideration of contracts, whether it's with Fika Cafe or somebody else for a venue such as the community center.
I'm going to ask our Parks and Rec Director to come on up. I think they did look at doing like a coffee kiosk or something. It just wasn't going to work out, but she would know that much better than I would.
And I don't think our Fika provider, I don't think they would be able to expand their kind of a one-man show, but
We don't have facilities for a permanent, Margaret speaking to a permanent location like they do at the library. However, we do want a little time. We are partnering with the high school district and they have a job training program for some of their students who are in school a bit longer. So they've been working with us during the week in the mornings with a job coach. But their coordinator for the district got some grant money. And so they might be bringing like a coffee cart and have their students as part of their job training coming to the community center. But that's still in the planning phase right now.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. If we were to have any further discussion on expanding the scope beyond the Fika contract at the library, then perhaps we should pick that up as a future agenda.
Understood. That
Thank you.
makes sense. Okay. Did you have any other questions, council member? Then we'd welcome a motion. Well, I'm sorry. Are there any other comments from the public? Oh, did you have a? So let the vice mayor, please.
Thank you. So I just want to put a little plug in for Fika Cafe.
Yeah.
They're amazing. They're wonderful. They're fantastic. Anybody who's watching, if you're looking for a place to go to lunch, the mayor and I routinely meet there. Of course, the library is lovely and beautiful, and Gada and Suleiman are essentially a sort of woman minority owned, immigrant owned small business, and they do live here in Burlingame. They also cater and a lot of other things. So they're wonderful. And I fully support their continuations contract. In fact, I'm thrilled they're going to be back. They're just wonderful. So I'll go ahead and make a motion if that's okay.
Please.
To approve item 8I.
I second.
A motion by Vice Mayor Coulson, seconded by Councilmember Stevenson. If we could have a roll call vote.
Sure, and there's no public comment.
Thank you. I suspected.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Coulson,
Yes.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes, and I endorse the vice mayor's comments. It is wonderful to have them in the library. And thank you for the question, Councilmember Stevenson. That's it's a good thought. So that takes us on to there are no public hearings. So that takes us to staff reports and communications, and it's the housing element annual progress report. Director Gardner.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Brownrigg and members of the council. It's a privilege to present the annual housing annual progress report for the housing element. In particular, this year is important because it's the 8th year, the last year of the current housing element cycle. In California, housing elements are updated every 8 years, and 2022 was the 8th year. So this is also our scorecard for the prior 8 years. Next, please. So the first thing is you'll see some illegible forms in your staff report. The format for the annual progress report is a series of Excel files, which are really probably not intended to be printed and read. They're intended to be fed into, they auto-populate into the state's database. So on the screen, there's lots of places to input all the data, all the information. We need to report every single building permit issued for every single housing unit. So it's a long list. And then we also report the different phases of those permits, whether it's a planning entitlement, building permit issuance, or certificate of completion. So it becomes a pretty unwieldy set of spreadsheets. The good news is there is a summary spreadsheet. So if you go to the next slide, please. Still hard to read on the screen, but at least a little more printable. But what I do have in the slides here are the highlights and the bullet points. So we can go through those and spare you needing to squint to read all the different numbers in the spreadsheets. Next, please. So this is probably the scariest of the bunch, but it's also the most informative. So this is what's known as Table A2. Each year, Table A2 gets bigger and bigger and bigger, but that's good because years ago, all we were looking at were building permit issuances, and that wasn't really telling the whole story. Now this table is also showing planning entitlements and also certificates of completion. So it is a broader array of what's really going on in housing construction. It is still for 1 year though. So one thing that's important to realize with this annual progress report is it is a snapshot in time. Next, please. So for the snapshot in time in 2022, there were 779 homes entitled. So that would be by the Planning Commission, or also in the case of accessory dwelling units. Those are not approved by the Planning Commission, but are approved by staff. Those are included in that total. There were 351 building permits issued, and that's really the magic number because that's what's considered when an entitlement becomes a real unit that will be delivered. Of those units, of the 351, 43 were below market rate. So that would be we'll go through the different income categories in a minute. Also of that bunch was 60 accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, were submitted in 2022, and 45 permits were issued. And last but not least, 160 units came online or were completed this year. Next, please. Another sheet. This one is probably the most useful because it looks at the whole 8-year period and it kind of brings things down. Again, too small to see on the stage. So we've got on the screen there. So we've got the bullet points, but again, 351 units were permitted in 2022, sorry, in terms of building permits. And that brings us to a grand total of 1,573 net new unit building permits that were issued in the 8-year period from 2015 to 2022. Just for reference, our target was 863 units. So we exceeded that by more than 182%. Of that total, the 1,573 units, 270 were below market, deed restricted for either moderate, low, very low, or extremely low income households. And that represents 17% of the total. Please.
Can I just point out one thing, because it threw me? When we write 17% of total, we mean that 270 units are 17% of 1,500 units.
That's
not 17% of our target
no, it's of those
of the total. Yeah.
And we'll go through the targets in a minute as well. Next, please. Speaking of, there they are. So regional housing needs allocation is what is known as RHNA, or HNA, but people call it RHNA. So this is the table that shows what our goals were for the 8-year period and what we were able to achieve. So in the very low income category, we were trying to reach 276 units. We did permit 82, which is good. 8 years ago, when we gave this presentation, that number was 0. So we are making some strides. But there is also room for improvement, and that's what we are focusing on in our next housing element. Low income category, 144 was the goal. We got pretty well into there, 80.6% at 116 units. And again, 8 years ago, that number was 0. Moderate income, maybe not as well, but that's also it's a tricky category in that overlap with market rate housing. So while we are not necessarily having as many deed restricted moderate income units, there are units that are coming online that are affordable to moderate income households. So it's tricky in San Mateo County because the median income is relatively high. So you do get this overlap. Certainly lots of above moderate. We've quadrupled what was the goal. So that really speaks to housing as a supply issue, that lots of supply is coming online. Maybe not necessarily deed restricted, but still supply is a big part of the housing solution. In terms of, we're talking about these different median income and area median income categories. In prior presentations, we have gone through these, but for the sake of people watching or just as a reminder, the area median income, AMI as it's called, changes every year. It's based on what the median income in San Mateo County is. In 2022, which was the most recent numbers we have available, the median income was $116,200 for a single person household, $132,800 for a 2-person household, $149,400 for a 3-person household, and $166,000 for a 4-person household. Next, please. So if we're looking at those categories that we really want to do better on in the next cycle, looking at that very low income category, the numbers are all there. I won't read through, but it's anywhere individual making $65,250 would fit into the very low income category in San Mateo County. For a family of 4, that would be $93,200. Next, please. Then there's a subset of the very low income category, extremely low income, and those are households that are making 30% or less of the area median income. And you can see the numbers for an individual 1-person household, that's just a little under 40,000. And that number is really significant. You'll see in the parentheses there, and some of you may remember from some of our prior presentations on who lives in Burlingame, who works in Burlingame, 38.9% of the workforce here makes less than 40,000. So they are in that extremely low income category. And it's not just a need for providing the housing, but it's also an economic development. It's very important in order to have the people to work in the businesses and keep the economy going here in Burlingame. They do need somewhere to live. And if they're driving very long distances, they may end up not working in Burlingame. So it's important for both as a housing issue, but also as part of the local economy. Next, please.
The Vice Mayor has a question.
Yes.
So the 38.9%, so we know those are workforce people versus say retired seniors living on Social Security. Okay.
Yes. And now in fairness, that is a 2019 figure, which is probably reliable because was the last sort of normal year. So things are, but it is of the workforce. So it's, I can't remember the exact source, but it is of,
Okay, so these are
it is of job.
in Burlingame. These are jobs,
These
essentially.
are jobs.
40%, 38.9% of the people working in Burlingame. I suppose a lot of them are probably some of our hotel workers in the Bayfront and things like that, are working at jobs that pay in the extremely low income. Is that what I'm making sure? I want to just make sure I got it.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that,
To 38.9% of the people that live here that are in the workforce. That's a different thing. Okay,
that's right.
got it. I just want to clarify that.
And that's equivalent to about a $20 an hour job. Though there's lots of those here in town, and it does put it in perspective. If you'll be making $20 an hour, which is a pretty good hourly wage, it's still hard to find housing in Burlingame.
Just to clarify, that is a Burlingame workforce as number? not
That's right.
count.
So if we look at all of the jobs, it's, I don't think it's American Community Survey, but it's one of the surveys where it adds up all of the different employment. So these are not necessarily people living in Burlingame. It is the workforce. It's people working in Burlingame. And of that group, it's, and as Vice Mayor Colson mentions, it's a lot of the service industry, hotels, restaurants, and such that would have an hourly wage. Please. So another interesting watching all this on a screen now instead of Zoom. We're used to seeing everything right in front of us, and some things don't translate as well. But we do have the major projects webpage, burlingame.org/major projects, with more tables, but these tables are more comprehensive. They're really showing the big picture. It's not a slice of 2022 or just 1 year out of the cycle. It's everything from approved projects, projects under construction. We still have a few completed projects on there that we will most likely drop from this sheet as they are now completed and occupied. And then it also shows projects under review. And when we do know of a preliminary project prior to it being submittal, if we know about it, we'll include it here. So this sheet is updated every month. We just published the March sheet, and there are also project pages for a lot of these projects as well. So we invite people to download these each month.
May I ask a favor, Mr. Director? So on this chart, going forward, I think you keep the data, but I'm interested in BMR units that have more than one bedroom. I'm interested in helping families, and especially, very often single moms and kids have a place. And it's hard to tell just from a BMR unit. If it's an efficiency, then it's not really hospitable for a family. So it would just help with a little bit of color and the kind of units that we're creating that are below market. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, Vice Mayor Colson.
Thank you. I think you bring up a really good point, Mayor Brownrigg, and this is sort of, to me, one of the sort of fatal flaws of the RENA production system is that we get credit for a unit regardless of whether it's a 3, bedroom unit for a household of 6 people or a studio for a single person. And so I think as we're sort of thinking about this and giving feedback to our legislature, that one of the pieces we could request is, RENA numbers probably should really tie into the number of people you house as opposed to the units, because it would then allow us and incentivize us to work on 3-bedroom and family size units, as opposed to just singularly, say, studio and 1-bedroom, maybe workforce or childless type couple
Seniors.
or seniors, So yeah, and some seniors have grandchildren and things. So it's just a perspective. It's not really anything that we can do about it today, but as we're, providing feedback, I think is worth maybe a letter after the RENA cycle.
It's a good point. And we are finding with both market rate as well as the affordable projects, the demand for the larger units is growing. And at least the recently approved as of last week, Eucalyptus Grove Apartments, which would be for very low income families. Those do have larger units, and I think that's responding to that. And I do think it's, looking at bedrooms as opposed to units is probably a good way to quantify a lot of this.
Thank you.
Next, please.
Oh,
Sorry.
Yes, Councilmember Beach.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great comments by the mayor and vice mayor. Concur. I think it would also be useful, at least from my perspective, as this document grows and evolves. I think a section for completed projects. I don't know, maybe it makes sense when the new RENA cycle starts that we don't track the old RENA cycle, but I do like seeing completed projects too, maybe just in a separate category if they're still relevant to the cycle. Thanks.
I think it's a good point. So as it is right now, we kind of have this sheet it stops at 2015, which was the beginning of the last cycle. So we've kind of kept it as a sort of dashboard for the Arena 5.
It's very useful document.
But that said, yeah, I think we have been kind of discussing, what do we do with the completed projects? When do we take them off? So people are still interested in completed projects. They'll often want to go back and see what was the unit composition, what was the affordability, where's the web page or the plan. So I think that is a good idea that we move them to their own part of the sheet.
Thank you. Councilmember Stevenson.
Yeah, and building up Councilmember Beach's comment, it might be good to go back and look at all those units that were completed and how many of them are multi, the density, the number of actual people that they served. So we can go back in history and start build that kind of view going forward as well.
To be a little mindful of privacy, maybe. But
Yeah, but I think we could look and see what was the density of each one in terms of number of bedrooms and things.
oh yeah, right. Good point.
That's what I mean.
Certainly.
Great. Back to you.
So the other thing we've done is we've launched a new webpage called Pro Housing Burlingame. And some of this is trying to get the record straight in terms of housing production in Burlingame. And this is also another kind of dashboard just to show this page will continue to be updated as we talk about the total number of units that are either under construction, under review, being reviewed, all of those. And what's important with this, and part of the reason we put this up there is we will concede our housing element is light. Same with 100 out of 109 Bay Area jurisdictions. That doesn't mean we don't want to do it. And that is the point is, first of all, there's every intention to have a housing element and to be productive with building housing. You don't need to have your housing element to start building housing. And then the other part where we heard some of thoughts are, if there's not a housing element, there's no housing plan or plan for housing. City has been very proactive at planning for housing for years, going back to the general plan and even before that. So what this page is trying to capture is that there has been a plan for housing in Burlingame all along, and it's bearing fruit. Next, please.
Thank you.
And then last but not least, this slide we saw back in January when we were doing the goal setting session. So it was showing this kind of dashboard of under construction, approved, and under review. At that time, there were 2,300 units total, with 394 of those affordable. If you go to the next slide, we now find ourselves in May. Those numbers have gone up again. We now have 2,677 units, either under construction, approved, or under review, and 569, 21% are affordable. And some of this is a result of, as I mentioned, the Eucalyptus Grove apartments were approved last week. And then also the submittal of the Peninsula Wellness Community, which has senior living, including a significant number of affordable units. Next. So there's not a resolution, but by motion, we ask that the City Council consider accepting the 2022 Housing Element Annual Progress Report and authorize its transmittal to the California Governor's Office of Planning and Research, known as OPR, and the California Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD. And with that, if there are further questions and further discussion.
Thank you, Director Gardner, and to your whole staff. Are there questions for Mr. Gardner? We've asked him along the way. So yes, Vice Mayor Colson.
Thank you very much, Director Gardner. Can you articulate once we turn this in, what the next stages are and when we would expect sort of ratification and conclusion of this whole element and cycle?
So there's two things. So this annual progress report is due April 1st. So we are early. We will submit it on time, and it goes into the state's database. And people who are interested can look at our annual progress report, compare it to other cities as well as to our prior reports. So we're meeting that requirement. For the housing element itself, it was submitted to the state in February. I'm trying to remember the exact date, February 17th, thereabouts. They have 90 days to look at it. We do know we've been in touch with our reviewer, so they are looking at it. Most housing elements are taking the full 90 days in order to get comments back. We of course, hope they love it and certify it, but most cities are not so lucky and usually there's a second round. But in any case, we should be hearing back from HCD in May. And at that time, we'll look and see what they say.
Thank you for that. I'm not sure, but if there's a purgatory, it might be having to read several hundred different cities' housing element
yeah.
and comment on it. But in any event, if there aren't any other questions, are there any questions from our public?
We don't have any emails and we have 2 attendees, no hands up, and it looks pretty quiet there in the back of the room.
Okay. Well, in that case, then, yes, Councilmember Beach,
Just have a comment, Mr. Mayor.
yes, please.
Really want to thank staff for that pro housing Burlingame website. You know, we dig into the spreadsheets of the residential overview, but that website is just so clear, concise, and digestible. I've referred a couple people that had questions just this very week to it. It's wonderful. So thank you for keeping that updated and really putting that front and center.
Would you like to roll into a motion?
I would be delighted to make a motion to accept the 2022 Housing Element Annual Progress Report and authorize its transmittal to the California Governor's Office of Planning and Research and the Department of Housing and Community Development, with a big congratulations to staff and to colleagues for this great work.
And I would be delighted to second that.
Very good. A motion by Councilmember Beach, seconded by Councilmember Ortiz, and thirded by all of us. Thanks to staff. Yes, please, Madam City Clerk.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Coulson.
Yeah.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, that takes us to item 10B, and this is a question of technology, and I will hand it off to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Brownrigg. And you know, I am definitely the person to talk technology here. So I'll just go through our staff report real briefly. We provide laptop or desktop computers and or tablets to city employees. So I have my trusty laptop here, as does the city attorney. Tablets tend to be for the folks who are out in the field working, and that enables us all to efficiently perform our job duties. Thus far, in my 10 years here, the council members have used their own laptops or desktops or tablets or whatever they happen to have to access city email and city council packets. That was all fine until we went through an upgrade to Microsoft 365, which we are assured is a good thing, but it's a little bumpy. And so that entailed in part migrating from an on-premises email exchange server to the Microsoft 365 cloud. So that's all supposed to be good for us. But as we know, it was a little bumpy. A lot of us weren't getting emails for a while. So if you haven't heard from us, our vast viewing public, maybe send that email again, because some stuff just got lost in the cloud. So as part of this, and this part is a good thing, we had new security features activated, and some of you may have followed the city of Oakland, which has gone through a hacking problem right now, and they have a hostage situation with their data, which is really not good. So we are trying to avoid that. So we have new security features for our information technology systems. And a consequence of this migration and the new technology is that not everybody can access their city emails anymore if they happen to have, like one of our council members does, a mobile phone and a laptop that are owned by their employer as opposed to their own personal technology. That employer has their own firewalls that don't play nice in the sandbox with our firewalls. So this council member went out and purchased his own personal tablet using his own funds, but raised the question, and it's not about his own personal funds, but really the bigger question of whether, and this happened, sorry, let me just back up, at the February 21st council meeting. This is a future agenda item. We're coming back with you. This may be a new record for coming back on a future agenda item.
That's the city manager's way of saying, don't get your hopes up.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that. Remember the iceberg. So the question is really the broader question of whether the city should provide tablets or other equipment to council members as opposed to relying on them to use their own technology. We don't have a policy on this question. It's not come up before. Nobody needed it before. Councilmember Stevenson was able to access his email up until
the switchover, which I blissfully was out of the country when that happened, so I didn't have to hear all the complaints about it. But so now we're asking council, do you want us to provide funding to either purchase tablets or other hardware for you, or reimburse you folks if you purchase your own? Do we want the city to provide the equipment, which would then be returned to the city upon the council member leaving office? Query whether that technology would be a little outdated by then, but that would be under that policy, or continue the prior practice. You folks are on your own, get your own technology, and we'll do the best we can to support it. There are some issues that we want to consider. Cost is a little bit of a, something we want to think about. It's not hugely impactful. It's not like when, we're building a new building or paving a road or whatnot, but there is a cost to it, and it's not in the budget. That doesn't mean it can't be put in the budget. But an iPad, I just went online and looked at iPads. They range from about $330 to $800. You can do add-ons, you can make them fancier, but that's kind of the general range. You make them more expensive with adding storage space, cellular access versus just Wi-Fi, separate keyboard, all that other stuff. Base cost of a tablet is comparable to that of an iPad. If you say, yes, we want the city to provide this funding to purchase these, then we would suggest that the council say, okay, we're going to give a maximum of X. So maybe the maximum is, $1,000, and that's your all-in cost. You don't have to spend it, but that would be your all-in cost. That would also include whatever accessories you want to put on, if you want a separate keyboard or whatever. We do think that IT, our information technology folks, would have an easier time supporting iPads or Microsoft tablets as opposed to any other kind of technology. There are tax consequences to this. And so if the city purchases these devices for the council members, or we reimburse you, if you don't give it back to us at the end of your tenure, if this becomes yours, not ours, then there are tax consequences. So it's considered taxable compensation, and we will deal with that when your tax information all comes out. And then the only other thing is Public Records Act implications. So I'll just read what our city attorney wrote, because it's better than anything I could say, to paraphrase. Any records created or used for city-related businesses are subject to disclosure under the California Public Records Act, and thus an exemption applies. So that's email sent or received, calendars, text messages, all of that is subject. For council members, any city-related records contained on personal technology. So if you have your phone and you're your own personal phone and you're using it for city business, it's subject to inspection and disclosure. For example, if a council member is sending, receiving, or storing email related to public business on their personal tablet or laptop or phone, those are all reviewable for disclosure under the California Public Records Act. A court may also order that the personal tablet or laptop be inspected for any city-related records. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. If it's a city-owned device, it's still subject to Public Records Act disclosure. It just won't, in theory, have all your other stuff on it, assuming you only use it for city business. So no fiscal impact from the receipt of this report. If you decide you want to go forward and provide funding, then I would encourage you to set a maximum cost that you're willing to provide. Our total is 5 times that maximum amount if everybody takes the allowance. And then if you wanted to include members of city boards and commissions, that is going to blow up the cost pretty substantially. So I am happy to answer any questions. And if you have questions about Public Records Act implications, Michael is available. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the background. This is really a conversation. There's not a recommendation per se. So who'd like to kick it off? Councilmember Ortiz.
Ask a question about the Public Records Act. So what we're saying is somebody could actually say you use your personal laptop for city business, so we're going to inspect it to make sure that there's not any other city business in there that we would be related to that Public Records Act. But that doesn't mean that my personal information is going to be available to the public.
Correct. And the inspection part would really come in sort of the extreme example of if there was a lawsuit that was filed, for example, and a judge could order, if there was a allegation that all of the records had not been turned over from your personal account, and there was an allegation that, hey, you're withholding some, a judge could order that the court inspect your phone or your personal phone or tablet to make sure that that's the case. And what would be turned over would be any city-related business, but not any personal related stuff. So the issue is, do you really want to, does the council member want the risk of a judge going through your email or your, phone log or whatever to ensure that there aren't any additional public records?
Great, thank you.
There are questions or comments? Well, somebody wants to kick off a reaction to the questions that the city manager has posed?
In comment mode or just question mode?
No, I think comment mode. This is a kind of, yeah. Go ahead, Councilmember Rubin, if you're ready.
I'm interested to hear what colleagues think. I've been thinking a lot about this. Couple thoughts. Feel like in this world we live in, when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to public record acts, I think it makes good sense to have separate gear for the work we do. I don't think the work we do is the same as what our commissioners do. I think council stuff has we have closed session information sometimes. I know I have a separate phone and devices for my other work. It's clunky to have separate devices, but I feel like there's so much that can intertwine, and I think there's value in having things separate, or at least giving council members the option to keep it separate. I also think that I would hate for it to be, there could be a council member someday that comes on board that it is cost prohibitive to go buy their own tablet or buy their own laptop. And it's not like, you guys can look this up. We don't get rich doing this. We get I think $500 a month of a stipend. It costs us all more to be on city council than it does for any income, with the option of health insurance, which is a real benefit. But, it's not like there's a lot of income. I think it's almost the least we could do is provide the option to provide a budget for technology that just keeps things cleaner and more separate. I think maybe it wasn't that way 5 or 10 years ago even, but I think in the world we live in today, it's not asking too much. And I think $1,000 is kind of reasonable, but I can tell you that a good iPad like this, you're going to want a really good cover, and that can be $150. And then you might need a keyboard. So we have to just think about that. And then we have to think of a cost escalator too. If we set a policy or maybe it's just city owned like that, just city owned. And when you leave, it goes back to the city. But that we supply the tools we need to do our job, which we need technology to do our job this day and age. That's my gut. I could be convinced otherwise, but I'll keep the conversation started.
Thank you for kicking it off. Councilmember Ortiz.
I agree with most of what was just said. But on the other side of that equation, for me, it's so convenient to have everything in the same one, and to be able to look at my personal email and just hit a button and look at my city email. And the same with my phone. I can have my phone. And again, I'm 100%. I brought this up because it was brought up by the city attorney a while back, as far as the Public Records Act and the possibility that it would be looked at. And so I struggle with this one because on the one hand, I agree with everything you said, but on the other hand, the convenience of having it all in the same place makes it so, okay, so then the question is, do we allow people to just go purchase their own and reimburse them so that we address what your concern is if somebody was to join the council and they couldn't afford their own equipment? And then just say you use it however you want, but the whole purpose of it is to segregate the personal from the city council. Yes, ma'am.
City manager.
I'll stop talking.
It's all very good points. I think, however this lands, it would not be mandatory. It would be optional. So if you like having all your stuff in one place, we're not going to force you to carry separate stuff.
Yeah.
If you want to carry separate stuff, then that's the question we're getting at.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Colson.
Quick question, but I would take it that a judge could compel you to hand over your personal device as well as your city device.
Absolutely. Yes.
So you still aren't having two devices doesn't protect you from that.
No.
Not doing what you're not supposed to do protects you from that.
Yeah.
But may I ask a question about that? like moving forward, let's pretend new council member comes on board after we have this policy. And they literally kept everything separate. I remember a former mayor said, you know, just always just do, if something comes to your personal email, just forward it to your council email, so you have it separate. So if that, in theory, new council member had everything separate and never really did use the personal device, in theory, a judge couldn't compel. I mean, this is getting extreme, but I think it's worth a.
No, absolutely. I mean, a judge can still compel, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the way that this would work in a real scenario is that there would be a Public Records Act request for council member communications, right? And staff would ask the council member to turn over everything that was responsive. Council member would do so, and we would then hand that over to the requester. If the requester then says, oh, no, I think that there's more, right? And the city says, that's all we've got because we've checked with our council member and they've said that's all they have. If the requester is unhappy with that, the requester could then file an action with the court, and the judge could then say, okay, to verify that there isn't any more, hand me your technology, so that the court will do an inspection, right? So that's how it would work out. And so you would be asked, you would be ordered to turn over the technology, most likely it would be the technology that you conduct city business on. So whether that's your personal technology, your city issued technology, if any, or both, right? And then the judge would go through your technology, for your password, and do an inspection for any responsive record.
Then you're right, it's complicated.
Yeah.
But there might be some value of keeping it separate though.
I don't, Councilmember Stevenson, you were part of the genesis here. I want to weigh in. I have a comment that.
Yeah, I was looking at it from the lens of my professional career and company. And you know, that is something issued by my company. It's got security up one side and down the other. And just mentally thinking, I should isolate this. I don't necessarily want to have commingling of what city business is, some of it being very confidential, obviously, with that device. Now, the problem of access was circumstantial. It wasn't the driver, but I'm fine with going out and getting a separate device on behalf of the city just to keep it separate, because I feel that's part of my obligation as a council member and protecting the interests of the city and the residents. So, but I don't necessarily need that to translate into, well, there's a issued laptop or not. But personally, that was where I ended up. That makes sense?
Yeah. Again, it's just a conversation. So I think I probably come down rather close to Councilmember Beach. I do think for one, there's going to be people like Councilmember Stevenson, who's actually required to get a second. It's not optional for him because his other laptop won't work. And I do believe that there is an equity issue for people that is worth considering. So I think I personally would lean into creating maybe $1,000 budget for technology with the following proviso. I would say that the city should not be buying phones. So this is for tablets, because then you don't get into the whole cellular contract stuff.
Reimbursement and all that.
It should be a one-time purchase that has Wi-Fi and all that, and anything that somebody needs to do beyond that in terms of connectivity should be on, I think, the council member. Not to mention phones for a lot of other reasons go out of date and all sorts of other things. So, but I could certainly support that kind of policy. I don't know how others feel.
I would support that. And I think the connectivity issue, a tablet can always be connected through a hotspot. So that makes it a one-time event, and it makes it a little cleaner. So I would support that.
Anybody else? Yes, Vice Mayor Colson.
Right. So, and I think for me, the most important piece of it is sort of the equity issue. That if somebody can't afford, we certainly want everybody on the council to be able to conduct their business. No doubt about it. I guess like just for me personally, I have my computer, I have my cell phone, and I have my laptop. So for me to carry 6 devices around isn't really going to function because I get everything on everything. So I'm sort of, I guess I would probably be willing to, probably not do it unless maybe it was just to have one here, that was, I guess that would be another question is, could we, if we wanted technology for here, could we, subscribe to this? And maybe I don't want to lug this all around, but could I leave it here and have it charged? And when it came, it would be available for me. In case I forgot my laptop when I got here, I think that would be probably,
I would think that, the way you use your technology budget, a little like the way we use our travel and conference budget is kind of up to you.
yeah, I don't know if the city wants to be responsible for maintaining my technology while I'm not here, like, here's a bin of with your name labeled on it, and Megan has to shove them all in her office and charge them when we all get here. I don't know. I may not need it, but the day that I forget my iPad, I'm going to wish I had. So it's just that I agree. I think that's fine. But I think people should recognize then that, if you open your phone and you put it on your phone and you open your computer and your texts and stuff are coming through, it's probably still going to all be searchable anyway. So I don't think having just your own separate tech is necessarily going to isolate you in the court from potentially having to turn over more tech. So I wouldn't do it for that reason. I think the better reason to do it is for equity and because of the fact that some people, my old employer would not have wanted it integrated. I know for sure. There's all kinds of issues around that. So I do think that's a really reasonable position to take.
Do you want us
So
to
I've-
discuss whether it should go back to, whether it should be city property or?
Yeah, so I think you have, for the most part, coalesced around up to $1,000.
Mhm.
So then the question is, do you want us to buy you stuff and then you give it back? Or do you want, to be the masters of your own destiny?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Ortiz.
if the city were to buy it, will it get a better deal than I can at just the apples? Are there some,
I probably not much of a better
Okay.
deal.
so then I would be, doesn't matter to me.
Well, the question is who buys it, but then also whose property is it?
Right. So if we take it back at the end of your term, whenever that may be, then you don't pay taxes on it. I mean, the taxes are not going to be super high, but there's still a tax issue. We didn't want to just ignore that and have you all get surprised after the fact.
Yes, Vice Mayor Colson.
Well, there may also be the opposite, like you have your city device and you may, eventually inadvertently or something like a personal email to make come through. And so when you return it in, there's the issue of like wiping it clean, like wanting to make sure, we should probably have a policy around the whole thing. Like, is it wiped clean? And then there's also IT tech support. So if you have your own laptop that you buy, but you get reimbursed, but it's yours, are you responsible for your tech maintenance? How often can you replace it? Is it $1,000 a year? So you can buy one every year. I think there's a little more we need to flesh it out a little bit. So is it once a year? And then would our IT people still support it? So if my screen goes black one day, do I walk in and hand it to Megan and say, here, take it to Eaton Associates, or do I have to take it to the Apple store? I don't have a solution. I'm just saying, I think we need to think about it.
I think we can all agree probably it's not $1,000 a year.
Yeah, I would say it's probably $1,000 once a 4-year term.
Yeah, once a term. Beyond that, would you, Madam City Manager, like to think about a potential policy and come back and propose it?
There's the issue of loss.
Yeah.
And there's,
I mean, we can try to hack it out here on the dais, but
Right. So it sounds like people don't want to give them back at the end, I think. I'm fine with that. You're fine with giving it back or not giving?
Yeah, I'm fine with
Giving it
I can,
property, but I'm sort of ambivalent. So
So if we could maybe just call the question of whether it's city property or not, then I can work with Helen and IT to come up with a good policy.
and let me just think about that for just a second. And after 4 years, that technology is not going to be, so as far as the value of the technology, when you turn it back, that's not an issue.
go to e-waste.
The real issue really is only the tax consequence and the personal emails that council member
Right.
or Vice Mayor Colson brought up. So I would say that, I would say, no, don't turn it in at the end. It just reimburse for the purchase.
Yes, Vice Mayor Colson.
So if the city purchased them and it's the city property, at the end, I believe, what you can do, and you know, in corporate America, this is what they do, you can offer it at the 4-year depreciated value as the person could then purchase it.
Mhm.
So that's the other option is at the end of 4 years, you can either turn it in or you say it's worth $250 and then you purchase it and the device remains yours.
Sounds sensible.
Yep.
And the other thing is if there's a technology problem or a software issue, like there's something nice with city property, you can call it,
Well,
having this problem here.
Although actually we can do that right now.
Yeah.
They've walked
Yeah, I
me
guess that's
through,
true.
you know.
Yeah.
They're really-
Yep.
I
Yeah.
think it's maybe more like, you know, if you drop it, you break it, you crack the screen, that's the kind of stuff you have to think about. Then do we have to repay it? I just don't know how all that works. Are we insured? Does the city have insurance on them? I just don't know, but
Right.
Apple.
every now and then, like I've had brand new iPhone just go blank on me, the screen just went blank and I took it in, they're like it's just a bad piece of equipment. It was faulty. So what are the warranties and all that kind of stuff and how do we do it? So I trust Lisa to figure it out, but
You guys are getting very complicated.
No.
having.
I
So I think you want the $1,000 limit and it sounds like you want the city to own them. And you turn them back in, or you have the option to buy it at the end of your service. That,
I think
right?
I think
I think you buy it. Technically, what you do is you buy it for the depreciated value that
Right.
Ellen has written it off. For the 4
And-
years.
I don't know that we discussed it, but I concur with Councilmember Beach that this is a council prerogative because of the nature of the information that we have and the sensitivity. I don't think we need to offer it to commissioners.
Agreed.
I like that answer.
Mhm.
Does anyone feel differently than that?
Would you like me to check if there's public?
Yes, let's have public. Thank you, Madam City Clerk.
We don't have public comment. But it's,
I would like,
This is, are you like, it's like Lucy with the football.
I know.
would like to add on the commissioner.
Yes,
Um,
please, Vice Mayor Colson.
So the only thing I would say about the commissioners is that they do receive and get email. If there were a commissioner who did not have the financial resources available to purchase any kind of technology to act, other than maybe Brad going to the library 24/7 or the community center, I would like there to be a policy whereby they could confidentially come to the city manager and explain their situation and give discretion to Lisa to, you know, if they, you know, I don't think we may ever run into that situation. It's just, I don't want someone to feel like they can't join a commission or be a part of us because they can't access technology.
I think that's an excellent suggestion.
Agreed.
We all agree. Have we given you enough to work with, Madam City Manager?
I think so. We'll see.
Okay. And I, for one, I'm sure we agree, would be very willing if this policy goes into effect in the next 30 or 60 days to reimburse Councilmember Stevenson for his expense up to $1,000.
What are you buying?
Okay, so that takes us through that item, and then it's his council committee and activities reports. Are there any activities that council members would like to brief us on?
The only activity which could have been under the initial like upcoming events is I do want to congratulate our staff that Sustainable San Mateo County awarded us the Green Building Award for the community center. And I believe that event is going to come up on Thursday night, March 30th. You can get tickets on Sustainable San Mateo County's website. I think it's just a lovely kudo. And again, Margaret and your staff and Kevin and Syed and everybody who was part of that. I really appreciate, and it's just nice to continue to get accolades on this.
Amen. Yes, Councilmember Peach.
And I guess just one other announcement would be the US 101 express lanes are now open, the full corridor, and it's exciting to see that project coming to fruition, and also for folks that are income qualified, meaning if they're making, I think in the last tax year, something like $77,000 or less, they qualify for a, thanks to the revenues from the Express Lane, a free $100 clipper card renewable annually, one per person in a household, or a free $100 preloaded fast track transponder. So the express lanes are accessible to everybody, of course, for free if you just choose to be in a 3-person carpool.
And thank you for your service on that project at the regional level. Any other committee reports? Seeing none, then that takes us to future agenda items. Is there? Yeah, the iceberg, I know, in the room. But any issues that people would like to flag for future work? I see none, so I will just say that we, the city manager and I did meet, and we will come back to you, I think, on March 20th with a report out from the hard work that you all put into the goal setting. And so we'll have a conversation on March 20th about the follow-up from that item. That takes us to acknowledgements. There are a number of minutes from the various commissions and the hard work they're doing. And then to adjournment, and I don't have anyone to adjourn in memory of, but does anybody else? Well, I thank everybody for being here. I thank our staff for all the hard work they do, and I will call this meeting adjourned. Can I
Thank you,
ask
Mr.
us to
Mayor.
just stay on the dais for a second? Are we done? Yeah. Can I just